Cheryl joins us on most of our live streams, and Cheryl's a Buckeyes fan, so I think she's just poking the bear a little bit here. Now, if Lou Holtz is the standard, or if we want to go back to Ara Parsegian and Newt Rockne and Frank Leahy, if they're the standard, yeah, Brian Kelly's not achieving much. But with every other coach through Bob Davie and Ty Willingham and Charlie Weiss on through all the way to Brian Kelly, he is doing a hell of a job winning football games consistently.
You know, that's the debate that Notre Dame fans are having right now. You know, to Cheryl's question is there's a certain faction of the Notre Dame base that says, well, you haven't won a championship, so you stink, which I think is, you know, an absurd stance to have. Then there's the fan base that said, hey, he's not Bob Davie, he's not Ty Willingham, he's not Charlie Weiss. He can coach as long as he wants. I'm in the middle. I think that we have to look at the job that Brian Kelly's done and say, you know, Brian Kelly's done a heck of a job when you consider when he took over, Notre Dame hadn't won a national title in 20 years. It had been almost 20 years since they'd even been a legitimate contender. That was back in 1993, which was, you know, about 16, 17 years prior to Brian Kelly arriving. They had come off of a 3-year stretch where they were under 500. The administration had not done a good job of supporting the football program. There was some envy from people that didn't like football, that didn't like that Notre Dame was defined as a football school. And there was all types of, you know, just insanity going on there. And Notre Dame had fallen, and they were just not a program that you were going to have a lot of success with. Old stadium, old facilities, just everything was working against them. Well, Brian Kelly came in, and also Jack Swarbrick, the AD, because that's a big part of this too, because Brian Kelly's not raising the $1 billion that they've had to raise in the last decade to put a new field, renovate the stadium, and build the new indoor facilities. It's all goes together. And Brian Kelly has brought to the program so far that if Notre Dame goes 10-2 in the regular season this year, some Notre Dame fans are disappointed. Well, when he got hired, you go 10-2, you're getting a contract extension. I mean, so you know he's brought him a long way. But to Cheryl's point, there have been things that Brian Kelly has not done good enough to get them to that next level. And you talk about the 2015 team. I will contend until the day that I die that if you take the 2017 coaching staff and put them with the 2015 team, that team could beat anybody. They almost beat Clemson at their place. They lost Ohio State in a relatively convincing fashion. They were missing several starters from that game. They had a top 5 Stanford team beat with 30 seconds left, and then your boy Brian Van Gorder decides he wants to give that up, give that L up. I say that you look at that team, 3 first-round draft picks in the offensive line, a second-round quarterback, 2 outstanding running backs, Will Fuller at wide receiver. You had Jalen Smith on the defense at linebacker. Your entire starting defensive line from that team is now in the NFL. I think 8 starters from that defense were drafted or played in the NFL. That was a team that could make it, but Brian Kelly chose to have Brian Van Gorder as his defensive coordinator, and that was their ultimate downfall that season. So there have been some of those type of self-inflicted wounds, Mark, that have kept the program from getting to the next level. But it doesn't take away from the fact, to your point, that when you look at what Notre Dame was the decade before Brian Kelly arrived and what Notre Dame has been the decade since, especially the last 4 years, he's taken the program a long, long way. Now it's time for him to build on that and build on that recent success, close the gap, and either win a title or leave the program in such good shape that the person who replaces him is ready to finally kind of kick down that door and get a title.
And to build on that point, we've got our next comment coming in, making the comparison between Mark Richt, what he did at Georgia, which I think is a bit underestimated. He finished in the top 10 8 times in 15 years. So he was consistently a top 10 coach, leading a program that was winning consistently 10 games a season, came within a whisker of a national championship appearance or pushing for that final game in 2012, 2007, 2005. So a number of times, but it wasn't enough. And so the question here, would Notre Dame finally pull the plug on a 10-2 repeated Brian Kelly performance at some point to say, hey, you got to get it done at some point? Or could Brian Kelly make it all the way to retirement, winning 9 or 10 games per year?
9 games a year? No, because 9 would be like 9-4, and I don't think that consistently is going to keep him there. But if he's winning 10, 11 games like he has So let's just say between now, 21 to 24, when his contract extends, he does exactly the same job he's done the last 4 years. He's going to stay the head football coach. I mean, as long as he wants to still be the head football coach. And look, I understand like the Mark Richt thing. It was always kind of, I kind of got a chuckle out of that. He was a victim of his own success. I've always said, go look at his first 10 years of Georgia and then go look at the 30 years between him and when they won the title in 1980. And there was no precedent for what he did over a 10-year period. Well, Brian Kelly's now kind of into that category. He's brought them so long that now Notre Dame fans are remembering, oh yeah, we're supposed to be competing for championships. And so now that he's being held to that standard, as he should be. But no, if he's winning 10 plus games a year, he's going to be the head football coach as long as he wants to. And he should. I mean, to me, I understand the need to say, yeah, you want to go win a title, but good luck trying to hire someone to replace him when 11-2 is no longer good enough. Because, hey, Nick Saban's not leaving Alabama to come to Notre Dame. I don't care if he's Catholic or not, right? Urban Meyer's not coming to Notre Dame. Dabo is not leaving Clemson to come to Notre Dame. So you need to make sure that you have the right plan of succession. And I also think that is where, if Brian Kelly has that kind of success, you could see him leave a little bit early, because I do believe Brian Kelly cares a lot about his legacy. Well, part of your legacy is who's replacing me. And if you don't leave on your own terms, then there's a better chance that you're getting replaced by somebody else. If Brian Kelly retired after the 2022 season, for example, let's just use that as an example, and the whole staff leaves because they went 9-4, and let's just say Matt Campbell or Jeff Brom or Urban Meyer, whoever else steps in, and they replace most of the staff and they go win a title, Brian Kelly's not getting a ton of that credit. If Brian Kelly retires after 2022 and Marcus Freeman takes over, for example, and they go win a title under Marcus Freeman, Brian Kelly's getting a lot of that credit. It's what he built it, right? And he stepped in and, let the young coach step in and kind of take over, much like I think Bob Stoops gets a lot of credit for what Lincoln Riley has done. So I think that Kelly's he's a politician, and he's a guy that understands about legacies and all that. And so that's why I don't actually think he's going to stay to 2024. But if he leaves, it's going to be his choice to leave, not them. He's not going to go through the fiasco that Jim Harbaugh went through this year with coaching as a lame duck coach. And I don't think he's going to get another contract. I think there's going to be a plan of succession at some point in time if they keep winning.
It's a great answer. And just to put a capper on what Brian was saying about Mark Richt, to the 25-year-old Georgia fan who talks to me all the time, and I'm not talking about in particular a specific person, but the 25-year-old Georgia fan who I hear from a number of times per week, again, even going through the latter stages of Vince Dooley's tenure, through Jim Donnan, Ray Goff, the 10-2s were scarce. There were a few of them, but they were pretty scarce. There was a lot of 7-5s. There were some 5-6s and 11-game seasons. Yes, Mark Richt elevated that program significantly. Mm-hmm. It's not Georgia of today, where people just assume, oh, that's Georgia, just like it's Alabama or Ohio State or somebody that wins all the time. And that has not been the case throughout the decades. Irish Breakdown, folks, get on over there. Just type it right into the search bar on YouTube, Irish Breakdown. You will find Brian's work over there. It's exceptional. Anything in particular you're working on right now, Brian? Any specific live streams that people need to look out for in regards to when you go live?
We go live every day at 1:00 Eastern now. So
there you go.
We do different topics. We cover recruiting. We'll talk right to was it today? They all kind of start to bleed together a little bit. Today we talked about the Notre Dame linebackers and just kind of looked forward to, where they're coming from, where they're going. Fridays at 1:00 is our Friday free for all, so it's just nothing but questions. The whole show is built around listener questions, and then on the website end of it, we're going to start really after Memorial Day, we're going to start a really big push towards the season. And so we'll have a lot of stuff like that, but we're going to have some fun stuff this summer too, Mark. We're going to do a series where we're going to kind of talk about the best players of each position of Brian Kelly's tenure. What are the best lines? What are the best D lines, best receiving cores? And then we're going to kind of have a Brian Kelly tournament. We're going to take his teams and kind of rank them and say, who to try to figure out who the best team is that Notre Dame has had. And of course, in June, we're going to have a ton of recruiting stuff. So we have a lot going on.
After hearing what I've heard over the last 45 minutes, I got to think that 2015 team is going to weigh heavily.
Yeah, it's going to be in the conversation for best running back. I mean, best backfield. You had C.J. Prosise, Josh Adams, Dexter Williams on that backfield. Receiver, you had Will Fuller, Chris Brown, Amir Carlisle. Offensive line, you had 3 first-round picks on that line and a second-round pick on that line. And the only guy that didn't get drafted was Steve Elmer, who retired from football after his junior year to get into. He's working in Washington D.C. now. He would have got drafted. So that was that was Ronnie Stanley, Quentin Nelson, and Mike McGlinchey on the same offensive line. That was a good group. And defensively had a lot of talent. It just, the only person that could stop Jalen Smith when he was in college football was Brian McGorder. I mean, that's just what it boils down to at this point in time.